I've been in hundreds of coding interviews on both sides of the table, the metaphorical table, and I've seen so many people make the same easily avoidable mistakes. So let me tell you some of the main things interviewers look for when assessing candidates, and if you follow this guide, I'm pretty certain that you're gonna have a better chance of passing that interview. Communication is such an important factor and is easily overlooked when people prepare for interviews. We want to determine a few things. Can this person work well in a team? Can they articulate what they're doing well? Can they pair program? And can they explain concepts well? And these are things that you'll actually be doing every day in your job. So do not stay silent throughout the entire interview. What you should do instead is explain briefly what you're doing as you code, so that if you start going down the wrong path, the interviewer can help you. Also, don't dive directly into writing code. Instead, re-explain the question in your own words to the interviewer to make sure that you understood it correctly. Just be polite and friendly. It makes a huge impression on the interviewer subconsciously. Don't jump into the problem and start writing code straight away. Major red flags. Come up with the brute force solution first, even write pseudocode if you have to, but just make sure that your solution works first. If you can't get an efficient solution by the end of the interview, at least you have this brute force solution that you can fall back on. Once that's out of the way, then you can start thinking about an efficient solution. And I'll make another video on this, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. A lot of the coding questions follow a common coding pattern. It'll help you to learn about these so that you can apply them in the interview. Interviewers want to know that you can take feedback well. So if they give you a hint, just take it and work from there. I've had people literally ignoring my advice. Like, the interviewer literally knows the answer. Interviewers want you to succeed. They've taken time out of their day to help grow the team. Once you have a solution and you've tested that it works, make sure you know how to calculate the time and space complexity in Big O. There's a lot of resources on this, so I won't go into too much detail here. The only way to become better at problem solving is unfortunately just lots and lots of practice. There's no shortcut to it. The more coding problems you solve, the faster it becomes for you to identify the patterns, and the easier it becomes for you to solve it efficiently. So while you're preparing, LeetCode is going to be your best friend. There are also platforms where you can have a live practice interview with a software engineer from the company that you want to join. Utilize all the resources that you can. Please, please, please take your coding quality serious. Don't be using variable names like X, Y, and Z. Have you ever seen a production code base with variable names like that? If you have, I'm really sorry for the pain that you had to go through. But interviewers want to see that you can write clean and readable code. That means using proper variable names as well as function names. If you find yourself repeating code, modularize it and write a function instead. Okay, so you need to pick an interview coding language, and this is just one language that you always use for your coding interviews. Learn as much about this language as you can, including like how garbage collection works, and what are the naming conventions, etc, etc. If you get these simple conventions wrong, it just shows that you haven't spent much time using the language. It doesn't really matter which language you use. Personally, I use Java just because I was comfortable with it when I started interviewing. It's also object-oriented and strongly typed. But a lot of people also use Python because the syntax is easy to write. Okay, testing. I know all you developers love your testing, but now you've got a nice, shiny piece of code that works perfectly. Wait a minute, works perfectly? I'm not so sure. It's very rare that you're gonna write something in interview conditions without any bugs. So you have to test your code. And no, I don't mean constantly hitting the run button to check that you fixed the bug. When you finish the solution, what you need to do is dry run it. And that means going through the code manually to check that it works without executing it. A common mistake here is that people test what they think the code is doing and not what the code is actually doing, because they're testing what's in their head and not what's actually on the screen. I've seen this time and time again. What you need to do is dry run the code as if it's the first time that you're seeing it. The next big thing is test cases. You need to be thinking about these before you've even started to code. You need to think of happy cases where the code works as expected, and even for these, don't choose really short inputs because they could be special cases. Instead, some medium to long inputs like 1 or 2 should do the trick. Then your edge cases. So is it an empty array? Are the numbers all positive? Are they all negative? Is it a null input? Is there a no input? Or are the numbers sorted, etc, etc. Make sure you ask these validation questions when you first approach the problem, because they could be the key for your solution. Okay, so finally, once you have all of the test cases, make sure you dry run the code with these test cases to ensure that your solution works perfectly. Remember, some portion of your interview will always be luck. Which interviewer do you get? What question do you get? And you could literally have prepared for everything, but the one thing that you missed might come up. Honestly, don't worry about it. Do the best that you can, prepare and practice, and just hope for the best. Use each interview as a learning experience. Worst comes to worst and you don't get the job, at least it's a free practice interview for you.